Hey kids, for today we will discuss equations with inverse trigonometric functions. First, let's recall the important properties of your inverse trigonometric function. So first, let's look at the domain of your inverse trigonometric functions. For sine inverse and cosine inverse, you have the closed interval -1 to 1. For tangent inverse and cotangent inverse, you have the set of all real numbers. And for secant inverse and cosecant inverse, your domain is this one right here. As for the range, the one with similar ranges are sine inverse and tangent inverse, then cosine inverse and cotangent inverse. The difference right here is that for tangent inverse and cotangent inverse, you're just considering open intervals, since at the endpoints, your tangent and cotangent are undefined. For secant inverse, you have this interval right here, 0 to pi over 2, including 0, union pi to 3 pi over 2, including pi. And for cosecant inverse, you have negative pi to negative pi over 2, including negative pi over 2, union 0 to pi over 2, including pi over 2. So today, what we'll do is solve equations involving inverse trigonometric functions. And our general strategy here is to write our equations in such a way that there's only one inverse trigonometric function involved as much as possible. Then after that, we can use the property of one-to-one functions where you can apply the original function to extract the one inside. So let's do number 1. We have cosine inverse of 2x plus tangent inverse of negative square root of 3 over 3 equals cotangent inverse of 0. So as we can see in this equation, only this term involves a variable, and these two right here are just constants. So first, let's evaluate these two. Let's do that on the side. First one, let's do cotangent inverse of 0. How do we evaluate inverse trigonometric functions again? First, we have to check if the one inside is in the domain of your function. And cotangent inverse has domain R. So that means we can invert the effect of cotangent inverse by applying the cotangent function to both sides. So applying cotangent function, since 0 is in the domain of cotangent, we'll just have 0 here equals, on the other side, cotangent alpha. So we have 0 equals cotangent alpha. And for this, we are choosing alpha. To be in the range of cotangent inverse. And the range of cotangent inverse is the open interval 0 to pi. So we are choosing alpha in 0 to pi. And when does cotangent alpha become equal to 0? This happens if 0 equals cosine alpha over sine alpha. And so this means that cosine alpha should be 0. And within this interval 0 to pi, cosine alpha equals 0 happens precisely if alpha equals pi over 2. So we have here pi over 2. And next, let's evaluate tangent inverse of negative square root of 3 over 3. So tangent inverse of negative square root of 3 over 3. First, let's check if negative square root of 3 over 3 is in the domain of tangent inverse. Take note, the domain of tangent inverse is the set of all real numbers. So this one right here is in the domain of tangent inverse. And so, we can let this to be equal to beta and apply the tangent function to both sides of the equation. Since this one is in the domain of tangent inverse, we can revert the effect to get negative square root of 3 over 3 here equals tangent beta. We have negative square root of 3 over 3 equals tangent beta. Now, how will we choose beta? We want to choose beta such that it is in the range of tangent inverse. And the range of tangent inverse is negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. So we are choosing beta to be in negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. And when does this happen? Let's observe our interval right here. This one corresponds to quadrants 1 and 4. And since you have a negative value for tangent, that means that the x and y coordinates corresponding to beta have different signs. And since they have different signs, we are looking at quadrant 4. If you are very familiar with special values, you would easily observe that beta right here is negative pi over 6. But if you're not familiar, we can make use of your reference angles. So how do we do that again? First, we look at the case in quadrant 1, then do some reflections to get to quadrant 4. So we use reference angles technique here. Reference angles technique. So once again, just like what I said, if you're familiar with special values, you already know that beta is negative pi over 6. But if not, let's look at the reference angle. So what we'll do here is find beta bar such that tangent of beta bar equals square root of 3 over 3. And take note, this is just square root of 3 over square root of 3 squared equals 1 over square root of 3. And this square root of 3 should be a giveaway to you because that means we're just considering 2 points right here. 1/2 comma square root of 3 over 2. And this one corresponds to the angle pi over 3. And the next one is square root of 3 over 2, comma 1 over 2, which corresponds to pi over 6. And what we know is that the y-coordinate corresponds to the sine, and the x-coordinate corresponds to the cosine. And as you can see, if we choose pi over 6, you have 1/2 divided by square root of 3 over 2. So that's times 2 over square root of 3 gives us 1 over square root of 3. So we now know that from this one, beta bar equals pi over 6. And so this is the solution corresponding to quadrant 1. To go to quadrant 4, how do we do that again? If you have this angle beta right here, okay, to go to quadrant 4, you do a complete rotation, but you subtract this one. But this line right here is just a reflection of this line in quadrant 1. So you still have beta right here, and so you get 2 pi minus beta bar rather. So beta equals 2 pi minus beta bar equals, so that's 2 pi minus pi over 6 equals 5 pi over 6. However, 5 pi over 6 is outside this interval, so we will use the fact that one revolution in a circle equals 2 pi. So 1 rev equals 2 pi radians. And so we can subtract 2 pi to 5 pi over 6. Yeah, 5 pi over 6 minus 2 pi, we get negative pi over 6, which is our supposed value of beta right here. So for tangent inverse, we have negative pi over 6. And we still have right here cosine inverse of 2x. Then let's do our simplifications. We can put this on the right side to get cosine inverse of 2x equals pi over 2 plus pi over 6. But this one in the right side, that's just, so you have an LCD of 6 here, 3 pi plus pi. That gives you 4 pi over 6, which is 2 pi over 3. So you have cosine inverse of 2x equals 2 pi over 3. So far, we're fine because the range of your cosine inverse is 0 to pi and 2 pi over 3 is inside that one. So assuming that 2x is in the domain of cosine inverse, assuming 2x is in the domain of cosine inverse, we can apply the cosine function to both sides. So we get here 2x equals cosine of 2 pi over 3. But what's cosine of 2 pi over 3? Take note, this is an angle in quadrant 2. And so we can consider the reference angle in quadrant 1. To get that, we just subtract 2 pi over 3. From pi, we get pi over 3. And cosine of pi over 3 equals 1/2. But since we're in quadrant 2, we know that the x-coordinates are negative. And since the x-coordinates are negative, cosine of 2 pi over 3 should be the negative of this one right here. So we have 2x equals negative 1/2. Then dividing both sides by 2, we get x equals negative 1/4. And that's the solution for number 1. So again, what's our method? First and foremost, evaluate the stuff that's needed to be evaluated. Do some simplifications until you can write your equation in terms of a single trigonometric function which is equal to a constant. Then assume that the one inside is in the domain of your inverse trigonometric function so that you can apply the original trigonometric function to both sides. Then from here, solve for x. Okay? So let's proceed to the next example. Maybe I should put a line here, so as I'm not wasting space. Oops, the other side is quite small. Okay, let's do number 2. For number 2, we have secant inverse of negative 2 minus tangent inverse of log of x squared base 3 equals cosecant inverse of 2. This problem might be a little bit intimidating due to the presence of this one, but let's do this thing first step by step. Let's not be intimidated by the presence of the logarithmic function yet. So as you can see, you only have one inverse trigonometric function with a variable involved. So let's proceed with evaluating stuff that needs to be evaluated. So first, secant inverse of negative 2. First, we check if negative 2 is in the domain of secant inverse. Take note that secant inverse has domain negative infinity to negative 1, union 1 to positive infinity. And negative 2 is inside this one right here. So we're sure that negative 2 is in the domain of secant inverse. So from here, we can let this to be alpha so that we get negative 2 equals secant alpha. And we're choosing alpha this time. We want alpha to be in the range of secant inverse. And the range of secant inverse is 0 to pi over 2 union pi to 3 pi over 2. So when does this happen? Basically, secant of alpha equals negative 2. That just means that cosine of alpha equals negative 1/2. And when does cosine alpha become equal to negative 1/2? That happens either in quadrant 2 or quadrant 3. But looking at our alpha here, we have 0 to pi over 2, that's quadrant 1, union pi to 3 pi over 2, that's quadrant 3. Oops, my illustration got lost. So since we have quadrants 1 and 3 only here, we are considering value of cosine alpha to be in quadrant 3. And when does cosine alpha become equal to negative 1 over 2? So, if you know your special values, that should just be alpha equals 2 pi over 3. Alpha equals 2 pi over 3. Or, if you're not familiar with the special values, you can look first at cosine alpha bar equals 1/2 in quadrant 1, and that will give you alpha bar equals pi over 3. And since you're looking at quadrant 3, we know that alpha is just equal to pi plus alpha bar, so that's pi plus pi over 3. Sorry, am I doing this right? Equals 4 pi over 3. So sorry, this should be 4 pi over 3. 4 pi over 3. Okay, let's continue. So from here, we have another one. We shall evaluate first cosecant inverse of 2. So what's the domain again of cosecant inverse? Domain of cosecant inverse is negative infinity to negative 1, union 1 to positive infinity. And 2 is clearly inside this domain. In particular, it's in this interval. So we can let this to be beta and apply cosecant function to both sides to get cosecant of beta equals 2. And this just means that sine of beta equals 1 over 2. But what value of beta are we choosing? We're choosing beta. Oops. We're choosing beta to be in the range of cosecant inverse, which is negative pi to negative pi over 2, union 0 to pi over 2. This one right here corresponds to quadrant 1, and this one corresponds to quadrant 3. Why quadrant 3? If you add 2 pi to both sides, you get pi, comma, 3 pi over 2. And this one is in quadrant 3. But since you have a positive cosecant, so let's draw our coordinate plane again. You have quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. Since you have a positive cosine, that means you have a positive y value. And so we are looking at quadrant 1 right here. So looking at quadrant 1, when does sine beta become equal to 1 over 2? That happens if beta equals pi over 6. So let's plug everything. We have secant inverse of negative 2. That is 4 pi over 3 minus tangent inverse of log x squared base 3 equals cosecant inverse of 2, that's pi over 6. So now let's do our simplifications. So we can put tangent inverse here and put pi over 6 right here. We have 4 pi over 3 minus pi over 6 equals tangent inverse of the log of x squared base 3. So 4 pi over 3 minus pi over 6, what's this one? So we have 6 here. 6 divided by 3 is 2 times 4 pi. You have 8 pi minus pi equals tangent inverse of the log base 3 of x squared. So we get here 7 pi over 6 equals tangent inverse of the log x squared base 3. So now let's look at what's given. You have 7 pi over 6, but you want this one to be in the range of tangent inverse. But what's the range of tangent inverse again? The range of tangent inverse is negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. But 7 pi over 6 right here, this one is outside the range of tangent inverse. So let's write that. Note that 7 pi over 6 is outside the range of tangent inverse. And so, since this one is outside the range of tangent inverse, you cannot find an angle alpha such that tangent inverse of alpha equals 7 pi over 6. So there's no alpha. There's no alpha satisfying 7 pi over 6 equals tangent inverse of alpha. Hence, this equation has no solution. Hence, this equation has no solution. Again, why does the equation have no solution? Basically, that's because in this part right here, you have an equation such that the other side is not inside the range of your inverse trigonometric function. So once again, you want to make sure that this one right here is in the range of your inverse trigonometric function. And if it's not, then that means you have no solution. I hope this one is clear. Let's proceed to number 3. Okay, for number 3, we have sine inverse of x equals cosine inverse of x. So how do we do this? Observe, there are two trigonometric functions involved this time. So this one is making things a little bit more difficult for us. However, we can do some clever tricks. What can we do here? Observe that we can try and apply the sine function to both sides. Because if we do that, this one right here would just cancel out with each other, giving us x. So first, let's try and do that. Assuming that x is in the domain of sine inverse, we can apply the sine function to both sides, giving us sine of sine inverse of x equals sine of cosine inverse of x. Then here, it will just give us x equals sine of cosine inverse of x. This one right here, it's somewhat easier. However, we still have a problem. You have an x here, and you have an x here. Furthermore, you have the composition of a trigonometric function and an inverse trigonometric function. So originally, you have two inverse trigonometric functions, but now you have a trigonometric function combined with an inverse trigonometric function. So what can we do? Basically, let's try and get rid of the inverse trigonometric function here. So we'll apply a substitution. Let's call cosine inverse of x as alpha. So we can let alpha to be equal to cosine inverse of x, so that we'll get on the right side sine of alpha. But how about the other side? What we can do here, assuming that x is in the domain of cosine inverse, what we can do is the same thing that we did a while ago. We can apply the cosine function to both sides, and in the right side we'll just get x, and in the right side you have cosine alpha. So that means you have x equals cosine alpha. So this x right here, that becomes cosine alpha. And so we are solving cosine alpha equals sine alpha, but we have the assumption that x is in the domain of cosine inverse. How will we do this? First, we want to find alpha in the range of cosine inverse. So we are choosing alpha in the range of cosine inverse. And the range of cosine inverse is 0 to pi. And if you're in 0 to pi, when does cosine alpha become equal to sine alpha? Let's try and draw our coordinate plane. So since alpha is in 0 to pi, we're just considering quadrants 1 and 2. Quadrants 1, and 2. In quadrant 2, is it possible for cosine alpha to be equal to sine alpha? Well, as you can see, if you're in quadrant 2, your cosine alpha is less than or equal to 0, but your sine alpha is greater than or equal to 0. So maybe I can write that one. In quadrant 2, cosine of alpha is less than or equal to 0, and sine alpha is greater than or equal to 0. So that means for cosine alpha and sine alpha to become equal, there's only one possibility. That is, if cosine alpha equals 0 and sine alpha equals 0. So, cosine alpha should be equal to 0 and sine alpha should be equal to 0. But is this allowed? As you can see, it's not really allowed. Why? But this cannot happen because what we know is that the points in the unit circle, since points in the unit circle are of the form cosine alpha, comma, sine alpha. Remember, this is our redefinition of the points in the unit circle using the cosine and sine functions. And so, this means that cosine squared alpha plus sine squared alpha equals 1. Remember, this one is your Pythagorean identity, right? You have a Pythagorean identity. But if cosine alpha equals sine alpha equals 0, that means, but if cosine alpha equals sine alpha equals 0, that means that cosine squared alpha, which is 0, plus 0, that sine squared alpha equals 1, which is obviously false. So that means our solution is not in quadrant 2. So that means this one right here no longer possible, and we look for solutions in quadrant 1. So in quadrant 1, what we know is that cosine alpha is greater than or equal to 0 and sine alpha is greater than or equal to 0. And if you will recall, there's only one possibility for cosine alpha and sine alpha to be equal. And that is if cosine alpha equals square root of 2 and sine alpha is square root of 2 over 2. So, recalling the special values, cosine alpha equals sine alpha only if cosine alpha equals square root of 2 over 2 equals sine alpha. And so, choose alpha in the interval 0 to pi over 2 such that it's enough to find alpha such that cosine alpha is square root of 2 over 2. And recall that happens if alpha equals pi over 4. So now we have our value for alpha, but what we are looking for is an x value. So using our substitution right here, this one, So let's call the substitution star. So substituting alpha to star, we obtain pi over 4 equals cosine inverse of x. And so, since x is assumed to be in the domain of cosine inverse, that's right here, we can apply the cosine function to both sides to get cosine of pi over 4 equals cosine of cosine inverse of x, which is just x. And clearly, cosine of pi over 4, that's just square root of 2 over 2. So x equals square root of 2 over 2. Okay? I hope the third example is clear. Now let's proceed to our last example. For our last example, what do we have here as our last example? We have where's it? Number 4. So for number 4, we have, oops, sorry. Okay. Number 4, we have cosine inverse of x over 2 plus tangent inverse of x equals pi over 2. This one right here, it's a little bit more difficult than number 3. Why? Once again, you have two inverse trigonometric functions involved. And furthermore, here you have an x, but here you have an x over 2. Sorry. So how do we solve this? Basically, we'll just employ the same technique that we did in number 3. So we employ the same technique as number 3. So first, let's assume. Okay, but first and foremost, maybe what we can do is separate these two inverse trigonometric functions. That is, we put one trigonometric function on the other side so that we can apply a certain trigonometric function. In this case, what I want to do is put tangent inverse of x on the other side. But you can also try and put cosine inverse on the other side. That's also possible. But let's just stick to this one first. Then, assuming x over 2 is in the domain of cosine inverse, what we can do is apply the cosine function to both sides. So you have the cosine of cosine inverse equals the cosine of pi over 2 minus tangent inverse of x. So why do I want to do the first step right here where I separated cosine inverse and tangent inverse? That's because if you will apply, let's say, cosine function to this side, you'll have the cosine of two terms, and that will result to applying the sum identity for cosine. And if you do that, you'll have a lot more terms because you'll have cosine of cosine inverse of something here, times cosine of tangent inverse of x minus sine of cosine inverse of something times sine of tangent inverse of x. And there's a lot going on here. So I don't want to apply a trigonometric function in a side where there are two terms with both with variables. So what I did is transfer tangent inverse to the other side so that when I apply cosine here, you have the cosine of cosine inverse of x over 2, which will just be x over 2, and in the right side you'll have cosine of pi over 2 minus tangent inverse of x. So now you might ask me, sir, isn't it the same thing? I have two terms here and I'm applying the cosine of two terms. Well, that means you can still use the difference identity this time, but you're a little bit lucky since you have a constant as your first term. And since that's a constant, eventually you can do your evaluations. So from here, you can either apply difference identities, or if you recall, cosine of pi over 2 minus x is just sine of x. That's because cosine and sine are co-functions of each other. So this one right here just becomes x over 2 equals sine of this one right here, sine of tangent inverse of x. And thankfully, this one is a little bit better. Why is it better? That's because you have the sine of tangent inverse here. You only have one term involved in the right side. And we are already familiar in evaluating stuff of this form. We can do the same technique in number 3 and let this to be alpha. We can let alpha to be equal to tangent inverse of x. And so we'll have right here x over 2 equals sine alpha. Now, how do we find sine alpha? Let's take note of this substitution right here. You have alpha equals tangent inverse of x. And assuming that x is in the domain of tangent inverse, we know that x equals tangent alpha. Basically, what we did here is apply the tangent function to both sides. So you have x equals tangent alpha. And so, what we can do here are two things. First, you can already substitute tangent alpha here. So, two possibilities. First possibility is substitute x equals tangent alpha to x over 2. But if you do that, what you'll have here is tangent alpha over 2 equals sine alpha. And so you have a trigonometric equation involving two trigonometric functions. And that's a little bit difficult. So this one right here is difficult. However, the second thing that you can do is write sine alpha in terms of x using tangent alpha. And this one right here is quite a familiar territory for us Because basically, what this one is telling us is to find sine alpha given tangent alpha and a certain condition about your angle. So what's the condition for our angle? So take note here. We are choosing alpha to be, if you are looking at this substitution right here, alpha equals the tangent inverse of something. So we're choosing alpha to be in the range of tangent inverse. And the range of tangent inverse is negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. So choosing alpha in the range of tangent inverse, we have our new goal. So our new goal is find sine alpha given tangent alpha equals x and alpha in the interval negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Let's try and visualize our current goal. So if you have the interval negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, that just means that we're looking at quadrants 1 and 4. And if you're in quadrants 1 and 4, right now it's a little bit problematic to determine sine. That's because sine can either be positive, or negative. But one thing's for sure, in this interval, cosine is positive. And for now, I guess what we can do first is find cosine alpha. Why is it better to find cosine alpha? First, take note that tangent of alpha equals sine alpha over cosine alpha. And right now, we know tangent alpha, but we know nothing about sine alpha and cosine alpha. However, there's this Pythagorean identity, 1 plus tangent squared alpha equals secant squared alpha. And since we know something about tangent squared alpha, we can find this one. And taking note that cosine alpha equals 1 over secant alpha, eventually we can find cosine alpha. And once you know cosine of alpha, you can find sine alpha right here. So what we'll do is first look for cosine alpha. First, find cosine alpha using 1 plus tangent squared alpha equals secant squared alpha. So what we know is that tangent alpha equals x. So 1 plus x squared equals secant squared alpha. Then obtaining the square root of both sides, we have the square root of 1 plus x squared equals secant alpha plus minus. However, since we are in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4, secant alpha should be non-negative. So that means your secant alpha equals the square root of 1 plus x squared. And now, since we know secant alpha, we can obtain cosine alpha, which is just the reciprocal of your secant function. So that's 1 over 1 plus x squared. Okay? Now that we have your cosine alpha, we can directly find for sine alpha. So now we know that tangent alpha equals sine alpha over cosine alpha. And so sine alpha is just tangent alpha times cosine alpha. A tangent alpha is x, and cosine alpha is 1 over the square root of 1 plus x squared. So this means that sine alpha equals x all over the square root of 1 plus x squared. Oops. Okay, sine alpha equals x over the square root of 1 plus x squared. So why are we doing this? Let's recall. That's because currently we have the equation x over 2 equals sine alpha. So what we did is write sine alpha in terms of x using tangent alpha. And we were already able to do that. So let's call this star. So star becomes x over 2 equals sine of alpha, which is x over the square root of 1 plus x squared. You have x over the square root of 1 plus x squared. And how do we solve this again? To solve this, we can employ cross multiplication. In the left side, you'll get x square root of 1 plus x squared equals 2x. Then, we can transfer everything to one side. We have x square root of 1 plus x squared minus 2x equals 0. And as you can see, they have a common factor of x. So we can factor out x to get x times the square root of 1 plus x squared minus 2 equals 0. And since you have a product of two factors which is equal to 0, that means that x equals 0 or square root of 1 plus x squared minus 2 equals 0. So what we do right here is solve these two equations. But this one right here, we don't need to do anything because x equals 0 already. So, exercise. I'll leave us an exercise. Check that x equals 0 indeed solves the equation. Indeed solves the equation. So that's just easy, no? It's easy to check that x equals 0 solves the equation. You just plug 0 here, and show that the resulting expression on the left side equals pi over 2. Now let's deal with the other equation. So if square root of 1 plus x squared minus 2 equals 0, how do we solve radical equations again? We isolate the term with radical. So we move negative 2 to the other side. You have square root of 1 plus x squared equals 2. Then squaring both sides. So here what we did is to square both sides. Square both sides. We get right here 1 plus x squared equals 4. Then solving for x, you have x squared equals 3. And obtaining the square root of both sides, you have x equals plus minus square root of 3. And I leave again as an exercise. Check that x equals plus minus square root of 3 solves the equation. Okay? So you have to, why do we have to check that both of them solves the equation? That's because of this step right here. What we did is we squared both sides. And if you can remember, if you square both sides, you introduce the possibility of extraneous solutions. And so it's possible that one of them is not really a solution of your equation. But it turns out both of them solves the original equation. So we have three answers here. We have x equals 0 and x equals plus minus square root of 3. As you can see, this one is quite long. There's a lot of things that happened in the... Oops! Where's my note? Yeah. In the first step, what we did is we transferred this to the right side so that in the left side, you're just dealing with a single inverse trigonometric function. Then we applied the cosine function to both sides to get this one right here. And this one is still a little bit difficult since you have a trigonometric function here and an inverse trigonometric. So we applied a new substitution, alpha equals tangent inverse of x, to get the equation x over 2 equals sine alpha. And from here, we discovered that there's two possibilities. First is to write everything in terms of alpha, but we figured out that it's difficult since you'll have tangent alpha over 2 equals sine alpha. So as you can see, you have two trigonometric equations, and that one is quite problematic. So instead of writing everything in terms of alpha, what we did is eventually write everything in terms of x. So what we did is find sine alpha in terms of tangent alpha, which is not quite straightforward. That's because if you want to find tangent alpha, which is sine alpha over cosine, if you want to find sine alpha, we know that tangent alpha equals sine alpha over cosine alpha, but you don't have information for both of these. So what we did is find cosine alpha first using the Pythagorean identity 1 plus tangent squared alpha equals secant squared alpha, and eventually we obtained this cosine value. And so we were already able to find sine alpha to be equal to this one. And so the original equation has been written in this form, and luckily this is just solving rational equations with radicals involved, which is something that we have already done during the start of this semester. So it's a little bit long and there's a lot of creativity that is needed to solve this one. So I think for this one, you just really need to practice the techniques that we did. That's why if you will look at our homework, it's a little bit long since most of our solutions here are not really straightforward. So I hope you are already starting with our homework. And just to recap, the deadline of homework 9 plus 10 is on Monday, that's May 27, 11:59 p.m. So thank you everyone and see you in the next video. The next video is actually our last topic for this subject. So thank you everyone.